hopefully going to entertain and help you through some education about the world of imitation watches, specifically Rolex. This is an example where the customer purchased this as a legitimate watch to the expense of about $3,000 or so. And when they had a problem with it, brought it in for service, it had been dropped and dislodged the indicator at number 12 and two of the luminous dots. You can see them missing here on the dial. And that's when we found out that it was not legitimate. So let's go over a few points about authenticity and what stands out to us but certainly would not to the consumer or layperson. First of all, the movement used for this imitation is an automatic, and so it has some weight to it, which adds to the legitimate feel of the overall product. The bracelet and the case are steel and they're solid links, so it's easy to be fooled by those things being in place, making you think everything is as it should be. So let's begin with a few indicators that say otherwise to the seasoned veterans or professionals, ever how you want to term it. First thing, there are no engravings on the inside of the case where there would be with the real Rolex. Number two, the movement is gilt and it's not rhodium plated. Rolex doesn't use gilt movements in their product. And number three, the details in the crown stampings, they're wrong. Here's something very interesting. This bezel measures the same diameter as a legitimate Rolex, but the lugs are wider. And of course, this tube stands out also as a brass tube. The legitimate tubes have a beryllium base and they don't discolor like this, and they don't have this kind of profile. Another thing is the stampings in the clasp. Interestingly, this one is a pretty decent rendition with fairly accurate stampings. They're fairly centered and not askew, and this one does have a legitimate bracelet number, 93135, but at the end it says -18, which denotes a steel and 18 karat, like this legitimate one here. But this is all stainless and that should not be there. Another thing that stands out are the manufacturing and mechanical details, and I'll use this legitimate bracelet to give you some idea. You see how close everything looks here, but then when you see the adjustment holes here in the side, you see a different diameter than the smaller ones. Another thing is this dimpling here in machine work. It's totally different than the real clasp. When we flip it over, there's a slight dimple right here for access to the flip lock to facilitate that. But on this one, it's very pronounced. That's incorrect. This hallmark here of the crown, it is shallow and the wrong size. And you can see the difference. Another thing is the length of the clasps. You can see there's about a 2 millimeter disparity there. So these are things that stand out big to us, but the layperson is easily fooled by. The initial reason it was brought in is because these indicators had gotten knocked loose. You will see on the back side of this indicator here, there are no feet that fit into the dial. It's simply glued on. So when the watch was dropped, the shock just knocked it off. So these are things that you need to be aware of when you're going to purchase a used watch. Get a professional to evaluate it and authenticate it, and get what we call a right of rescission from the seller. Maybe 3 to 5 days worth. That gives you some time to get it looked at and evaluated. And whatever that evaluation cost is very cheap insurance. So that's what we have on this go around with the steel imitation. Now here is another example of a imitation Rolex, but this one is intimidatingly scary. This was a big dollar purchase, and you wouldn't know it as a layperson, but this case looks completely legitimate, but it's rhodium plated, and you can start to see some of the yellowing of the metal underneath showing through. The dial is a refinished dial. These settings are not correct for the legitimate Rolex dial, and some of them are off center from their marks. That would never happen with a real item. These hands, they are imitation. You can see the luminous stopping here at the end of the minute hand, and then here in the hour hand it stops a lot closer to the end. That would never happen either. Let's remove the case back. This looks legitimate, but it isn't. They're using an actual Rolex movement in an aftermarket case. Another indicator, look at these lug holes where the spring bars at the end of the bracelet fit in. Look how large they are. They should be about half that size. Let's take a look at the bracelet, and if the camera shows you, you can see that yellow patina where the rhodium is rubbing off and wearing off. You can see it better in some of this area of the blade. And here again, the stampings and markings. You see how dissimilar they are as far as distance from the opening. And the depthing is wrong. It's very coarse and not very uniform and professional. The end pieces are very rough machined, and they're not stamped with the correct number. I believe in this case it'd be 55B, and you can see that doesn't appear here. But here's one of the more advanced and better efforts to fool the buyer. It is a legitimate Rolex movement, but it is not a legitimate case and not a legitimate bracelet, but it is gold. Very scary business. Get a professional to check out the used watch that you want to buy, whether it's Rolex, Omega, or any other brand. It's worth your time and your effort. All right. Until next time, thank you for viewing. Bye now.